So I want to thank everybody for coming and making time out of your Saturday to join us today. And we have a lot of fun, and I so appreciate the Mavens chapter for making this possible for us, because we love getting to meet with others, and particularly other folks who are active in Sisters in Crime. I think we're all members of our local chapters, and it's really fun to get to meet other writers and support each other. So thank you very much. And I'm Jen Collins Moore. I'm the author of the new Maggie White mystery series, which came out in September. So I'm still in the 1 year where I get to call it new. And I am here with some fabulous authors, and we're going to talk about the detectives in our stories and all the people who help them, which we found is some of our most fascinating conversations. And please use the chat function, because we want to make this really interactive. So we will take questions at the end, but if you put them in the chat as they come up, that'll be a great place just to capture them. And we're going to break about 3/4 of the way through for some trivia questions about some famous sleuths and their sidekicks. So hopefully you guys are readers. There are no prizes, just for fun. So that'll break it up. But I want to get started first with Tina deBellegarde, whose official bio is the author of Winter Witness, nominated for both the Retreat West and Blue Pencil Agency's first novel award. It's brand new, also just out in September, and it's the first in Tina's Batavia-on-Hudson Mysteries series. But what Tina has not updated in her bio is that it received a huge award nomination in Agatha. So that is just fantastic and so exciting. So congratulations, Tina.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Tina lives in Catskill, New York with her husband Dennis and their cat Shelby. And when she isn't writing, Tina's helping Dennis tend their beehives, harvest shiitake mushrooms, and cultivate their vegetable garden. And she travels to Japan regularly to visit her son Alessandro. In that setting, I know plays in some of your stories. Carol Pouliot is the author of the Blackwell and Watson time travel mystery series, now in its second book. Carol is a retired language teacher who volunteered with USAID and also owned a translating agency that provided translations in over 24 languages. Carol lives in central New York, where the snow reaches over 12 feet every year. Very jealous about that. Lida Sideris is the author of the Southern California mystery series, now on her fourth book. Her first stint after law school was a newbie lawyer's dream, working as an entertainment attorney for a movie studio, which was kind of like her heroine, Corey Locke, except without the homicides. Lida was one of 2 national winners of the Helen McCoy Mystery Writers of America Scholarship Award for her first book, and she lives in the northern tip of Southern California with her family, rescue dogs, and flock of uppity chickens. And I'm Jen Collins Moore. I transport readers to Rome in my new series, The Maggie White Mysteries. And it's been called the perfect blend of funny and smart. And it's filled with the art, history, and food of Europe's greatest city. I'm also the founder of Mies Meals, which is Chicagoland's most popular meal service. I live in Chicago with my husband and my 2 sons. And I want to dig right in. This panel is called Sleuths and Sidekicks, so it's all about our detectives. And I want to learn a little bit more about your inspiration for them. Tina, why don't you start us off?
Okay. Well, I had the typical inspirations ever since I was a kid. I was really attracted to these strong female characters, amateur sleuths. I loved Nancy Drew as a kid, grew up and found Miss Marple and then Jessica Fletcher. And I just found this idea of an amateur who could maybe put together things that would otherwise be overlooked. I always thought that was so intriguing. I wanted to create a smart female character. So my female amateur sleuth is Bianca, and she has just been recently widowed, and she and her husband had recently moved to a new village. So she's, city girl in a country setting, trying to fit in. She's and she's a good amateur sleuth because she's a historian, which gives her this like. I don't know, historians are really good at making connections and solving puzzles. She's an outsider, which actually helps her because it gives her a fresh outlook. She can see things that the locals just either refuse to see or no longer see. And she's a really good problem solver. Oh my. She's a really good problem solver. And I'm very inspired by my own experiences. Like, I consider myself a compulsive problem solver, and the thing about that is being able to spot a problem, not just to solve them, but to know that there is one. And as an outsider, Bianca is good at spotting them, but she's an outsider, and that's not always welcome, right? It doesn't make you friends to be the one who calls attention to problems. My story opens, not a spoiler, first page with the death of a nun found murdered on the edge of the lake. And Bianca, while she's trying to fit in and make a way for herself in the community, she volunteers and she starts working with this local historian. She's ailing, she's very ill, and she helps keep her company and nurses her or whatever. And they become friendly, and she shares her personal history with her. But she also, as she's doing that, shares a lot of the local history and secrets. And with that information, Bianca starts to see connections that other people aren't seeing. So that's her strength, is putting all those pieces together. And that's my smart amateur sleuth.
Well, and I love that you were talking about how you were taking parts of your personality, the problem solving, the making the connections, and applying it to your character. Because I think when we're writing, we need to, they always say, write what you know, and it doesn't have to be all the nuts and bolts, but you're taking the personality and how that person thinks. Lida, tell us about Corey. Were you doing the same thing of using parts of your personality, or how did Corey come to life?
Yes, actually, I started out completely writing what I know, and that follows through most of my novels. I wanted to write a mystery very badly, but I just didn't know where to begin, so I thought I'd begin with myself and use myself as the blueprint. I was once a 26-year-old entertainment attorney working for a movie studio, and that's what I made my heroine. But as I started writing it based on my own life, it was so boring that I kept dozing off. So I decided to turn her around and give her skills that I will probably never have, but I certainly will never have. And I wanted her to do things that I would never do. So I made her the daughter of a famous private investigator in Los Angeles. And through her father, she had shadowed him on some of his bigger cases, and she had helped him solve them. He had also inherited his collection of weapons, legal and illegal, and she knows how to use them very well. So when she lands the same job that I had in a movie studio, she does everything but practice law. That's all I did, but she's immediately blackmailed into looking into a suspicious death of a criminal. There are a lot of scenes in my first book, Murder and Other Unnatural Disasters, that reflected my life when I was there, but I took them in directions that I never dreamed of going. I also have her, she investigates alien encounters. I never did that. She's involved in a low-speed car chase. I never did that. Anyway, I had a lot of fun putting her in my situations, but having completely different outcomes than I had. I mean, I had the same boss, or very similar boss, I should say, that she had in the movie studio, but I was asked once to go for a helicopter ride, which I declined, and as she does as well. So again, I had so much fun writing what I know, but turning it on its head and taking it in a completely different direction.
Well, and I think that idea of sort of the what if exercises of, what if I'd been in the same situation, but this path had happened, where would life have taken me? And I think that's how I was working on Maggie White, who's the hero of my story, which is about a middle-aged American who's been always focused on her career, her getting her kids off to good colleges, focused on her marriage, happy, sort of nice, normal life. And then her kids are gone, her job falls apart, and her husband gets this opportunity for them to move to Rome on an expat assignment. So, his company will pay for it. She thinks, great, I'm just going to take it easy, live the good life. But when she gets there, is without all those things that her life has been focused on, she's really struggling for identity. And I think that's something that I was going through in my life, of going through different transitions between, what is my job? What is my life? That all of a sudden we all go through these times in life where the thing that we used to introduce ourselves as, or who we were, has fallen away, and kind of what's left and who you really are at the core of it. So that same what if exercise, even though I was not drawing on personal experience of having the empty nest yet, my kids are still young, and have not yet had my husband get us the expat assignment in Italy. That was just based on travel. But I think that ability to explore the what if for me is a lot of fun. And so for Maggie, it was, hey, here's this woman looking for identity. What if she finds herself being overlooked by everybody, including when she finds a dead body? Well, if the police aren't going to consider her a suspect, she's going to get involved and show them, that she is someone worth paying attention to. So that was a lot of fun, giving her voice. Carol, how about you? Because your main character is not a woman, so I think you were going in a different direction. Tell us where he came from and how that came about.
Yeah, I had a very, very strange experience decades ago. I was 29 years old. I was teaching, and I was living alone in my first apartment. And I'm a very deep sleeper. In the middle of the night, it's around 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up like that. I mean, from deep asleep to fully awake in a nanosecond. And as I was waking up, my heart was pounding and I was terrified already because I felt somebody else in the apartment. So for those of you who live alone, or if you've ever lived alone, you know that feeling. You know when somebody else is in the house. And I turned to look, and right at the end of my bed at the doorway, there was a man standing there. I don't know why I didn't have a heart attack. Honest to God, I was terrified. My brain is screaming, how am I going to get out of here? How am I going to get out of here? My heart went from pounding like crazy to stopping. And he looked in at me, sort of peered in, and I had a light on in the living room behind him. So in the shadows, I could sort of see a little bit of his face when he turned his head a bit. And then he stood up, he shook his head, and he walked through the wall. I was like, what the heck just happened? I turned on the light and I shook uncontrollably for about a half hour. That happened 4 nights in a row. Now, after the first night, when he walked through the wall, I wasn't scared anymore because, I don't know what he was, but he wasn't like solid real, and I didn't feel in physical danger. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I'm going to see if I can, engage him. So the fourth, 3 o'clock in the morning, when I woke up and there he was again, I said, hello, are you real? And he went through the wall and I never saw him again. So obviously that never left me. I mean, that was 1979, however many, 40, some years ago. And over the years, I remember him like it was yesterday. 5'10", medium build, dark hair, sort of slick back, plaid flannel shirt, sort of browns and greens, dark brown corduroy pants. Definitely had that 30s vibe. He definitely did not look like somebody from the 70s, the way he, moved and dressed and just looked. And I always, books have been my life forever. And writing a book was always like, other people do that. I could never do anything like that. That's not me. And after I retired from teaching, I thought, why not? Let me just try this. So I took that experience, I turned that, whoever he was, whatever he was, I turned him into Stephen, my 1934 Depression era detective. And I invented Olivia to take like, my position, not really me, but, a female position, modern. And I thought I had heard over the years that Einstein thought that all time happened simultaneously. He didn't think there was past, present, and future. He thought that another time was just beyond the veil. And if all the planets lined up and if everything fell into place, time could fold over and reveal to you, somebody, me, another time. So that's what the foundation that I based the whole series on. Olivia, I had them be 80 years apart because I wanted there to still be somebody alive from his time that could connect with her. So they're far enough apart so that it's, shocking, but they're close enough so that they can have connections. So 80 years apart. So he's 1934, she is 2014. So that's my series.
Well, I love that because really you are taking what you know and putting the same what if exercise onto it. And I've heard you tell that story multiple times and it gives me chills every time. So your ability to turn it into positive art is fabulous.
Thanks.
And I think thinking about Stephen, because I think, when you're writing a mystery, one of the first choices for your detective is, do I want it to be an amateur? Do I want a professional? And, you know, there can be a range in between. With Stephen, you went straight on professional. This is what he's paid to do, to solve crimes. How did you make that decision?
Because I don't think I'm clever enough to figure out all the reasons why an amateur could insert herself or himself into a case. I am very logical and organized, and I like police procedurals. So that's why I write police procedurals. To me, I have the structure that I'm comfortable in. You know, somebody's killed. Okay, the cops know just what to do. They grab their gear, they go to the crime scene, they make sure that they preserve the evidence, and then they go, you know, looking for witnesses, and they interview the families. And there's, you know, what like Poirot says, you know, order and method. So that's very comfortable for me. I made Stephen a lover of organization and routine as well. He digs out in the first book, do you guys remember in the old schools, they had these big blackboards with a wooden frame on wheels. And of course, there's a wooden chalk tray underneath. So he dug out one of those, and that's his murder board. So he, you know, tacks the crime scene photos around the edge, and he has his categories. He writes his list of witnesses and evidence, and, you know, he makes diagrams and tries to see connections and stuff. So he also likes the order and method of police procedure. And I have each book happens in a week. So the very first day, I like the murders to happen right away, as soon as possible. So he has the first murder usually right away. And then 7 days later, he knows who did it and why. So everything nicely wrapped up in a week.
Order and method seems like a very good principle when thinking about how to approach a story, and he's got a reason to be there, which is nice, because sometimes that's one of the challenges.
Yeah.
For Corey, how did you insert her? It sounds to me like crime came looking for her.
Well, first I want to say that Carol handles the time travel in her books seamlessly. I mean, I was wondering how she could pull that off, but I don't know how she did it, but it is very seamless. I also admire Carol's dedication to order and method and organization, because yours truly has very little of that. And that transfers over to my heroine as well. Again, she's only 26 years old. She's not perfect. She's got skills, but she's going to make mistakes. I wanted to create a semi-professional or quasi-professional because she is a daughter of a well-known PI, and she has inherited the skills, but she also wants to be a lawyer, or she's trying to be a lawyer, because something happened to her father and she doesn't want that to happen to her. So in my first book in particular, she's a very reluctant sleuth, but as the book continues, she becomes less reluctant because she gains more confidence. She's not a professional sleuth. She doesn't get paid, but she starts getting, in the first book, a famous basketball star repays her by gifting her something very large for finding his missing lucky charm. As the second book, she doesn't get paid because her best friend / love interest has a little bit of a problem. He's about to be accused of murder, and she has to solve it before the police find out, and so on. So as the book continues throughout the series, she becomes more and more proficient, so that by my latest book, Slightly Murderous Intent, she and her sidekicks are thinking about starting their own private investigation agency. And that's also because she is on the verge of either being laid off or fired from her studio job, her lawyer job in the studio, because she's never there. She's never there because she's always trying to solve a homicide, or some cases thrown at her. So she has some problems, which we're trying to work through as the book continues. The book I'm currently writing is number 5 in the series, Gambling with Murder, and she's getting closer and closer to opening up her own PI agency. We'll see how that goes.
Well, and I think that evolution, you've really sort of tacked onto a really interesting thing, that as writers of series, which you and Lida have, or you and Carol have successfully done. Tina and I are on the path of having the series. We're planning, you know, Tina is much further along on her second book than I am, but there is this challenge to always have a new reason for the detective to be engaged and to have that coming. And for me, I've got my amateur sleuth because I really wanted somebody who the reader could sort of be on the shoulder of and have a fair play detective story where the facts are all out there. You've got the same information that the detective does. So at the end of it, even though you don't solve it yourself, you say, aha, I could have, I had the same thing she did. And so I wanted to be able to be looking over that shoulder. And for the first crime, it was easy for me to give Maggie a reason to be involved because she hated her boss. She was fantasizing about killing him. She would never actually do it, but she had a lot of pleasure thinking about maybe him stepping in front of a bus or drinking a concoction that we all know how to make because we've all read plenty of mysteries ourselves. And then when he actually dies, it's sort of, oh, you get what you ask for, be careful about that. And she becomes a suspect and as it grows how big of a suspect she is. But then for the series, we're thinking about that organic, natural way for somebody to stay involved in the crimes and to have a reason to be there, I think is always a challenge and an interesting question. And Tina, for you, how are you managing that amateur professional balance?
Well, similar to yours, I have this amateur sleuth, and what it was really important to me was I needed this amateur sleuth. I thought it would be so much fun, but she had, like Carol was saying, you have this difficulty trying to figure out how do you get yourself inserted into the investigation. So the relationship she has with the sheriff is really important. And I really built on that. I really wanted them to have a reason to interact. So one of the great advantages of writing in a small town is that that's actually fairly reasonable. It's not so far-fetched that, and it's a very small village, right? And very much like the village I live in, and I think that you can bend those rules a little bit. She does not belong in this investigation. He's reluctant to have her involved, and yet she has insight and she offers him information that's helpful and useful. So he kind of welcomes her a little push, pull. So there's this tension. She missteps and gets into scrapes and complicates things. And yet then the next moment she hands him something valuable. And that tension also carries on to their relationship because he has a bad marriage and he's trying to remedy his failing marriage. She's grieving and trying to get over her grief, but there's this tension between them. So that's something that we'll be visiting throughout the books. And so it's a question of, like you said, trying to put them in the situation that makes sense. And in the first book, because she's lucky enough to befriend the historian, this woman gives her information and some of her journals, and she's got this insight. The book I'm working on now, they end up evacuating as a result of a flood. So it's not a locked room mystery exactly, but because they're in even tighter quarters than an intimate village, she can find herself involved, even though normally she wouldn't be. My third book is going to be in Japan, and it's going to involve people that are important to her. So it's far from home. I'm trying to avoid the Cabot Cove syndrome. It's virtually impossible. And as far as I'm concerned, people who read books like this or watch shows like this don't care. Like, Cabot Cove can have a lot of murder so that we can watch more Murder, She Wrote, So.
Well, and I think that you're right that we want as readers to spend time with these characters. And so we're willing to have more opportunities for them to sort of get into things because we want to spend time with them. And for so much of it, it's not just the detective who draws us in. It's really the world around them that they create and the people who are populated in it, which, we called this panel Sleuths and Sidekicks because I think to all of us in our writing, the sidekicks are where a lot of the pleasure in the writing comes from and the joy, and it completes the story. Mm-hmm. You need to have somebody for your detective to be interacting with. And Lida, why don't you kick it off? What makes a good sidekick for you?
Well, I discovered somewhere along the way that we all everyone in this room has sidekicks, right? They're our friends, and they're friends that fill in gaps that perhaps we need filled. And that's how it is for Corey as well. She has 3 sidekicks, and they're all very good friends. They're loyal. They're mostly trustworthy. They've got skills she doesn't have. They're great listeners. And the best part, they show up when they're needed. So when I write my sidekicks, I need to see a face in my head. I need to see them, what they look like, what they talk like, what they do. And I have that for each one of the sidekicks in my book. Corey's best friend and potential love interest is Michael. And whenever I write Michael, I think of an actor that I had a brief encounter with. And I liked him so much. He was a very sweet, nerdy, good-looking guy. He was the right age, and every time I've seen him, he always wears his high-top Chuck Taylors, and that's how I see Michael too. The actor was Zachary Levi. He was in Chuck, and he was in Shazam and some other shows and movies as well. So every time I write Michael, I think of him, and it helps me to hear the voice that I need to hear. Corey's other sidekick is her legal assistant and also friend, Vera. And every time I write Vera, I see someone that I would love to hang out with, and that is Queen Latifah, because she has a very sunny disposition. I can't see anyone not liking her. She gets the job done. You can count on her. And she seems very well connected, which Vera is in my book. She's a former security guard, so she knows a lot of people around town. She drives a classic VW Bug, so she knows all the right car people too. So how could Corey resist having her as a sidekick? And then the third one is an assistant district attorney who plays by the rules, and he keeps things legal because Corey is very apt to veer into the illegal waters, which could land her in jail, but he tries to keep her above water so she can, survive as a private investigator. So every time I write these people, even secondary, incidental characters, I like to see someone in my head. I mentioned a professional basketball star in my first book, and it was someone I had a close encounter with for like maybe 10 seconds on the golf course with my younger son. It was a day where Michael Jordan had brought all his pals to play at our local golf course. And this particular gentleman was so kind and so sweet in asking us if he could play through that I thought he's obviously a cat lover. And so I put him in my first book, and his cat is his lucky charm. And when the cat's missing, he hires Corey to find his lucky charm. Anyway, this was basketball player Alonzo Mourning. And I never forgot that. He made such an impression that he had to end up in my book. So that's how I fashion my sidekicks, Jen.
Well, it sounds like they're all coming from a place of love, which is a very nice thing. So if anyone ever says, I think I saw myself in your book, you can be like, yes, it was a tribute to you.
Absolutely.
And I was thinking about when you said, that we all have these sidekicks in our lives, that really resonated with me because my book, Maggie, she's got several people. I was trying, as we're thinking about sidekicks, I don't have just one. It's not a Watson and Holmes type of situation, that she has this world. But for Maggie, what's interesting for her is she's a real fish out of water, that she has arrived in Rome. Back home, she could run the PTA, she could run the boardroom, she knew who to call for anything. But now she's in this place without her support network. And so one thing I found when I was thinking about who is populating her world, she has sort of a frenemy who's befriended her, but she doesn't think really likes her. And she's got some employee, co-worker type folks who she's not sure how much she can trust and whether they're involved or not involved, but maybe they're all on the same side. But what I came down to for me is she has her husband's great aunt Gertrude, who is the type of woman who maybe some of you are fortunate enough to have them in your lives. I've got one of these people sort of helicopter down. They delight the children. They undermine your parenting completely. They drive you crazy, but you also know, that they're the energy, the spark in the room, and that they know who you are at the end of the day, even if maybe sometimes they're telling your kids how to get around your rules or, how to get away with things, who are always living a more glamorous life than you are. And so for Maggie, what was really fun is at a point in the book when great aunt Gertrude arrives, unannounced, of course, unexpected, but they have to let her in because if they don't, she's just going to jimmy the lock and drink all the booze anyway. So they welcome her in, even though Maggie doesn't have time for her. And she's the one who can say, when Maggie's at a low point, you've got this. You're a capable person, because she's the only person in Maggie's world who knows what she's like back home, and you can help her really regroup those strengths that I think sometimes when we're going through an identity change, we lose. And so we always need a little kickstart. And so I resonated with that idea of it's people who know us and know what we need and can kind of fill in that parts of our personality. For me, really get a sidekick going. And then when you can have the fun layering on the personalities of who you'd like to hang out with or who you'd like to be somebody else's relative and not yours. There are always those people. Carol, how about you? Because you're in a more traditional Watson and Holmes situation, or maybe you're not. I don't know how you would describe it.
No, you're right. You're right. It doesn't start out that way. And Olivia grows into becoming Stephen's sidekick and sort of, I think of them like partners in crime. But in the beginning, all of her help is based on their time travel experiments. So in the first book, in Doorway to Murder, this is obviously where they first meet. And they go through the experiments to figure out, what's happening to them. And then they accept that time has folded over in their house and they can, I think I forgot to mention that. They live in the same house and time folds over in their house in the middle of the night. And that's how they see each other. And then I just, put my own experience in pretending it was them. So anyway, after a few days, they have gotten comfortable with each other. They've accepted what's happened and they start experimenting to see what they can do with this time travel business. And eventually, over the course of his investigation, at night, he comes home and they try this, that, and the other. And Olivia tries to come into his time. Then he goes into her time. So they end up spending pretty much every evening together. They have supper in his kitchen or her kitchen, and they sit around the kitchen table and just talk and get to know each other. I gave him a love of science fiction and the future. So obviously he's very curious about police procedures in the 21st century, and he wants to see what cars are like, and he is stunned that he can watch the Yankees on TV because he can just hear them on the radio in his house. And I gave her a nostalgia for the 1930s, the golden age of travel and Charlie Chan movies and The Thin Man and stuff. So she roams around his house looking at every single thing. So that sort of got off the question. But so while they're talking at night, he talks about his investigation. And in Doorway to Murder, he gets to the point where he can no longer trust anyone in his time. Everyone around him, including the police department, becomes a suspect. So he turns to Olivia to talk the case through. And sort of like Archie and Nero Wolfe, he brings the information home and they discuss it and she helps him solve the crime. So by the time we get to Threshold of Deceit, the second book, it's 2 months later and they have decided to, up the game, and Olivia is going to try to come into Stephen's time and leave the house for the first time. So when she does this, she, roams around. She's a former reporter, so she's used to talking to people. She's very comfortable meeting people, talking to people. She ends up substitute teaching one day. I couldn't resist that. I gave her a connection with one of the murder victims. Anyways, so she gets in with the community and she ends up making friends with one of his main suspects, although she doesn't realize that this person is a suspect, which of course puts her life into danger. So they rely on her being there for a number of things at the end of the book, which of course I can't say. In the third book, which comes out in September, Olivia is at Stephen's house in 1934 for a Halloween party and goes upstairs to the bathroom and watches his neighbor across the street get murdered at the front door. So Olivia is a witness to this crime and she is much more involved. So each book, I get her more and more and more involved. Not only does she just talk about things, but she actually has moves as we move through the books. So,
Well, and that dynamic of sort of, you've got the professional information and the amateur makes sense. And Tina, your amateur has access to some professional information, but I don't know that that's who you consider to be Bianca's sidekick, is it?
No, basically she's the sheriff's sidekick unofficially, but once she's as an amateur sleuth and she's going forward with her own investigation, she's making friends in the community, and each one of these people has something to bring to her, right? As far not knowing they're participating necessarily, but and again, these are relationships that will evolve. And one of my favorite things was populating my village, and I often think of the Three Pines Village, you know, Louise Penny's. You have the Inspector Gamache, so you have your official investigation going on, but then the villagers at Three Pines always have something to do with it. And so there are all these really interesting characters. I think they're interesting anyway. She has Lester, who's going on 100, right? The centenarian who has tons of information just by token of being alive for the longest in the village. And she has her friend that she's developing, I would say her closest friend, Olivia, who's the editor at the Gazette. Having that inside scoop literally is helpful for her, and Bianca's going to start writing for the Gazette as well. And there's her neighbor Claire, who's like the busybody. Everybody has one in their town, and she knows she's got the dirt on everyone. One of my, and there are more, but I'd say one of my favorites is Eugene. And I noticed when people write reviews or people give me feedback, a lot of people love Eugene. He runs the diner, Stella's Diner, and Stella's is the heart of the town. And so he's like everybody's favorite bartender. He's serving coffee though, you know, and he is a really good listener. He's kind, he's attentive, and he's right there in the center of town where everybody passes through at least once a day. And as a result, it's an information hub. So he's very useful that way. So it's not really uncommon to find Bianca sitting at the diner counter with Eugene, sipping coffee and chatting about the investigation. You know, just like I said, it's not so far-fetched to find Bianca sitting at the park bench talking to the sheriff and chatting about the investigation, because it's a small town, and that's what we do in small towns. Everybody talks about everything and everyone.
Well, thinking about talking about everyone and everything, I think it's time for our trivia quiz. So this is where we would love for people to either use the chat function or answer on screen by waving your hand. Lida has some questions for us about some famous sleuths and sidekicks. So you can test your memory right now of all the books you've read and see what Lida has for us.
Yes, and again, there are no prizes for your answers if you get them right, but you will have our undying respect and admiration. I'm going to
So answers should go in the chat. Did we say that? I don't know.
Yep, either chat or if you want to wave your hand on Zoom.
yeah, and make sure you unmute your mic if you're gonna say it.
Yes, I'm going to start out easy, and I'm going to work our way to harder questions. Whose sidekick is Dr. John Watson? See, do we have any?
Somebody's waving their hand here.
Starting easy.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Sherlock Holmes.
Okay, good job. Yes, exactly. Whose sidekick and BFF is Henry Standing Bear?
Very good.
Longmire.
Yeah.
Good job. Very good. I'm going to go to a TV sleuth now. Who's famous but somewhat OCD TV detective? I should say, what famous OCD TV detective had a Jersey Girl sidekick named Sharona?
Monk.
Yes. Good job, Monk. Let's get a little bit more. Let's get a little bit harder. Well, I don't. This might be easy. This is actually an easy one too. Two cousins, Bess and George, helped what famous girl detective solve many of her cases?
Nancy Drew.
Everyone probably knows this answer. Yes. Okay, good job. What Scottish policeman relies on his beautiful and elegant sidekick, Priscilla? I'm going to need some help here, and I think probably Carol.
Yeah, Hamish Macbeth.
Okay, thank you. There. Thank you, Tina. Okay.
Remember it.
Let's try one more. What American sleuth always keeps a little black dress in her car? Susan?
Kenzie Milhone.
Yay. Okay. Good job, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I've heard some of these questions before, and sometimes I still forget them, but I love them. They remind me of all the books I want to reread. So I wanted to talk a little bit, because it has come up a couple times when we've been talking about our stories, which is place, which I think so often is almost another character in a book. And it's one of the reasons why people either pick a book up or why they want to keep coming back to it. Lida, yours is set in Southern California. It's the name of the series. How did you get there?
Well, I live in Southern California, and Southern California, as many of you might know or imagine, is vast. So I have plenty of places to select for different things to happen. I especially have fun picking places that I've been to and having her go to the same place and having quite a different outcome. For example, in the opening of my latest book, Slightly Murderous Intent, I selected the opening because it was inspired by a restaurant my husband and I had gone to in Santa Monica, California, which was just lovely. We had the nicest experience. Our dinner was wonderful. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to throw my sleuth in there and see what happens to her. She goes into the same restaurant in the opening chapter. She orders her food and never gets served, which makes her angry or hangry because she's starving at the end of a long day. So she goes and looks for a manager to complain about the fact that she still doesn't have her dinner. And what happens? She gets served crime a la mode instead. So I have, again, things like that happen. And also, I put her in places that I've never been, and I learn things about them. I think it's the second book or the third, I'm sorry, I can't remember which one, but she goes to the LA County morgue. I've never been there. I have no plans of going there. But through my research, when she goes there, I discovered that there's the LA County morgue has a gift shop where you can buy swag. You can buy beach towels with body outlines, or you can buy, I don't remember, plastic skeletons, body bags, whatever your heart may desire. So I didn't know that place existed. In my second book, there's a pig sanctuary actually close to where I live. I've been there before. It's very sweet, and I found that the pigs are actually, they're very clean, they're very smart, they're very nice to have around. So in the second book, I put in an animal sanctuary that my heroine goes to because she has a group of pigs that she considers to be potentially murder suspects. Anyway, fortunately that doesn't come true, but I had a lot of fun, again, going to a place that I had actually been and letting her go and just completely turn it on its head and find different things happen. It's a lot of fun for me.
Well, and as a reader, what I love in your books is the armchair travel experience, because I don't live in Southern California, haven't spent a lot of time there. And so for me, part of the pleasure is getting to soak all of that in. And I think that armchair travel experience is really, it's big to me as a reader. And it was also big for me as a writer, because I was thinking about, gee, it's going to take a lot of time to write this book. I want it to be set in a place where I want to escape to. I live in Chicago, which is a very lovely city, but many, many, many authors have done it justice in stories. And so I didn't feel like the world needed another mystery from me about Chicago. And so when I thought about all the places I love to visit, Rome was at the top of my list. It's a place where I've gone to many times, not had the opportunity to live there, which is why writing it as sort of a newly arrived expat felt like a way to kind of cheat the corners there. But it was so much fun getting to think about at my desk, like, gee, what does this piazza smell like? And what, does it look like after the rain and the puddles? And getting to spend time thinking through those aspects of it was something that I just love bringing to life on the page. And then, thinking about sort of the community that you can build, because Tina, you've talked about the small town aspect, and I realized I sort of inadvertently created that small town because my expats are all kind of hanging out together and the crime is in their community. And so even though it is in a very large city where my character Maggie is leading tour groups around, so as the reader you get to visit some of the big sites and see them and all those things, Maggie's world and the suspects and those things are contained. She goes to the same cafe where the owners know her and they help her when she's in a bind, and she has the same social set. So it's funny how no matter where we are, we can create that community. And Tina, obviously location is huge for you. It's part of your series name as well. It's not a real place. And how did you come up with it?
it's funny to me that it didn't occur to me early on when I thought about writing, but I thought about writing a long time about writing this first novel before I actually did it. But the Catskill Mountains have always been a part of my life because my relatives owned a resort up there, like one of those Dirty Dancing resorts. And I've been going my whole life. I've worked at these resorts, at the resort. But a few years back, my husband and I moved there full time because I'm in Florida wintering right now, but moved there. And I just fell in love with it all over again. And I immediately started taking these beautiful walks that my protagonist does. Bianca walks every day in the book. And you know, you just have these beautiful winding roads and quiet paths. And while I'm absorbing all the beauty, I also realized that it was really just an ideal spot to make a murder mystery series, right? Because the lake is around the corner. There are dangerous cliffs in the paper all the time. Somebody's always falling off those cliffs. They have an abandoned quarry down the road for me, aging resorts. There are just so many these winding roads and speeding pickups. And I said, I could write a murder a week here. There's just like, there's so much potential. So I said, it's quaint, it's lovely. It's a place I'd like you with Rome, a place I'd love to spend time. So then I got really excited about the idea. And what I did was I started creating this fictitious town because I said I really didn't. I live in such an intimate town. I did not feel comfortable making it my town because it's too small. So I just took all my favorite aspects of my neighboring villages and created my fictitious village. And I got really excited. I put out this huge piece of paper, started mapping it out, putting all my favorite things on it, and I love that map. And it's in the opening pages of my book. It's on my mug. And I have a new colorized version coming out this year, so I'm very excited about that. And so that's just about the town, the setting, like looking at it. But it's also about, like you said, how it smells, how it feels, what it looks like, the seasons and how they affect your senses. And I live in a town just like that. And it's very cozy and warm and welcoming. And it's also gossipy, but we all like love each other and get along because you have to, because it's too intimate a place. And that was something I was trying to recreate, the idea that we're also very different and normally might not be friends, but because it's intimate, you are friends and you don't have a problem with that. And I love writing setting and I love characters. And my third book is going to take place in Japan. And I'm very excited about that. So Bianca has a son living in Japan, coincidentally, like I do. And the second book I'm almost finished with, has an event that sort of spurs the need for her to go to Japan, other than the fact that her son is there. So she has two reasons. And so I'm very excited about using that as a setting also, like you do with Rome, because I've been there many times. I love to spend time there. It's going to be in Kyoto, which is the ancient capital. So it's full, of things to write about. But I go on. I digress.
Well, Carol, for you were doing places you knew, but in a time you didn't know. How did you go about that?
Yeah, actually, I have, I'm not only split into two times, but I'm split with an imaginary town that I created and a real town that I grew up in. So the first thing I decided that I wanted to do was create my own town, like Tina. I took out a big piece of paper and I have it tacked on the wall in my office. I have every single person's house where they live, all the businesses, everything is there. And I love that map. And one of these days I would like to get that in the front part of my books as well. So that was a lot of fun creating my town. And then I have Stephen and his team travel. I set it in the Mohawk Valley for people not from New York area. It's pretty much in the middle of the state. Just below the Adirondack Mountains, a few minutes drive below the Adirondacks. So I have Steve and his team travel to Saratoga in the first book, and to Syracuse as well. I have them travel through Liverpool, which is where I grew up. So I'm sort of taking advantage of the best of both worlds, where I can engage readers who are familiar with these places by describing what the places looked like, 100 years, well, not quite, 1934. One of the things I've been doing on my Facebook author page, I've started a series called Pictures from the Books, and I'm posting pictures of the places that I, write about back in that time, as well as other things that make up my setting. That has been one of the most fun things, is researching 1934. And like we all know, the five senses are so important. And I've had a chance to, in Syracuse hosts the Nationals every July, which is North American Classic Car Festival. I think it's the biggest one in the country, but in any case, literally hundreds, like thousands of people come with hundreds and hundreds of classic cars. So I've had a chance to take pictures of cars that Stephen would be seeing on the road, actually his car as well. Some of the guys, when I tell them a writer and I'm doing research for books and so forth, they let me sit in the car, they start it for me so I can hear the horn, I can hear the muffler, I can hear what the town sounds like with those cars, that's been a lot of fun. I've been using primary sources in my research, and I forgot how much I love research. I've found a radio guide in a used bookstore. I don't know why they had this magazine, but like the TV guide. And coincidentally, it was exactly the same week that Doorway to Murder takes place. So I was able to write exactly the right kind of radio show at the right time that Stephen would have been listening to on Tuesday night. So I've had a lot of fun, mostly focusing on 1934, because as the series goes on, the books take place more and more and more in 1934, with, a little bit in the present. The other thing, and this is the last thing I'll say, the other thing that I did using setting to my advantage, in the very first scene of the first book, when time folds over and they see each other, I felt like I needed something really, really powerful to balance that unbelievable, occurrence. So I had it happen in the middle of a raging blizzard, where the wind is rattling the windows and the snow is like 3 feet and, 3 hours worth of snow. And I felt like using that kind of weather phenomenon, I mean, the worst blizzard you could ever think of, using that balanced the, unbelievability, the amazing time folding over. So for me, setting is one of my most fun things to work with. I love it.
Well, and as a reader, it's just such a delight. It's one of those things, I think before I started writing, I didn't even necessarily notice it. And then I looked back when I realized I didn't put any in my first drafts of, oh, this is what these writers are doing. But until that little, switch had changed, I didn't realize it, which I loved. I think being a writer has made me a more interested reader, which is one of the things that I've loved. And now we have just a few minutes left for questions. So would love to ask people, if you have any questions, put them in the chat or raise your hands. We've got one I saw come in from Janet, and then, or Janet, you're right there. I'll let you ask live.
Well, I know how Carol and Tina got connected, but how did all four of you get connected with one another? Did you meet at a writers' conference, or?
We all have the same publisher. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're an example of a pandemic silver lining, which is we have the same publisher. We had books coming out at the same time, and looking for ways to promote, we had the chance to come together and have made some great writer friends out of it. But I think in normal times, we'd say, gee, it doesn't make sense. I'm in Chicago, you're in California. I can't, justify a plane ticket to go to a bookstore. So I think we're a silver lining for sure.
Did your
Definitely.
publisher get you connected, or had you read each
No,
other's books?
No, we did.
We were on a Zoom meeting with the publishers and a bunch of the authors.
Yes.
And it came up, like Jen said, that somebody said, oh, gee, does anybody want to get together and promote books coming out this fall? And the four of us were the only people. I mean, there must have been 25 people on that call at least. The four of us were it was serendipitous. You know, the four of us said, I will, I will, I will. We immediately got together and arranged a meeting for the four of us on Zoom, and we clicked. I mean, they're like my new family.
Well, that's terrific.
Yeah, we're very lucky. We're very lucky
Yeah.
because we don't work exactly alike, but we're all doers and we're innovative and we've got ideas and we get excited. We get on a Zoom call for the four of us to make plans, and we have one coming up, in fact.
Yeah.
And we get like all excited, you know, and then we say, wait, that's a little more than we can handle. You know,
Jennifer,
but
go ahead.
no, but we're very lucky. That's all I'm saying.
All right, Jennifer, you did a wonderful job as a moderator
Ah,
here.
She's a great
Oh,
moderator.
thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for coming. But Janet, I saw you did have a question about the map, about Tina's map. I
Yes,
think.
and she answered it.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
see it in the chat.
Yeah,
Right.
no, because we did it individually, because she asked me about my map, if I had started it before I wrote my book or after, during, and then she told me Louise Penny made her map first, which I didn't know, and I love any connection to Louise Penny.
Well, for
so-
5 years, she was going to write a book, and her husband would come home every day and say, well, have you gotten started? How is it going? and then she went to a group of in the town where they were artists and painters and dancers and whatever, and she thought, oh, they keep
This is my time.
reflecting and improving their work. It doesn't have to be perfect to begin with. So then she got the idea, well, she would create, you know, a town with the people that she would want to, you know, be friends with. And so she created her map, and that's how it all began.
Oh my gosh, I love that story.
And somebody at a church supper said something about the pines and what they represented, the three pines for the loyalists.
Right, that's right, to the loyalists, right.
Yeah, and so that's how it all
That's it.
began.
That's the center of her story, right? And I did too. I started my map before I started my story, but then I started outlining, and then I started writing, and then I fleshed out the map as I was developing my story and my characters and my village. And she kept walking. I needed to know where she was going, and so I just kept building my map.
Well, I think the Mavens should go and on a tour of your town.
That should be interesting. We could do that. We could piece together all the villages, go with a bus.
and go visit your writing place that your
We
husband
could do
built
that
for you.
too. I have my cottage. Yes, I have a writing cottage. We could do that. We could end there, and we could have tea or champagne or mimosas or something.
Now you're making the rest of us jealous. I'd like a writing cottage. That sounds fabulous. I think, Lida, you've said you use a different computer to type on, don't you?
I have a dedicated laptop. Yes, that's what I use.
Brilliant.
Only for my writing. Otherwise, it won't get it. I have enough trouble getting the first draft out as it is. So I need to do whatever I can to make myself sit in a chair and do it, to finish it. Every time I finish a book, I think it was a miracle because I don't know how it happened. I also work full time. So it makes it a little bit more challenging.
You are a miracle. You are a miracle.
you.
Yes, you are. As is Jen, who's juggling so many things. You too.
And kids,
your business,
kids
your
involved,
family,
yeah.
your dog. Yes.
Everyone is a juggler. We all are doing it. We're all pulled
Yeah,
in
we're
million
juggling.
directions.
For sure. I do want to say again how grateful, Janet brought it up, how grateful we all are that we did somehow join up together. Because the pandemic hit, I had a book coming out, I didn't know what to do. And then here we are. So I'm very grateful. And thank you so much, Mavens, for hosting us. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you being part of our conference too. And I hope sales come out of all of this for you.
Yes, thank you. This was really wonderful, really inspiring for writers out here.
Well, thank you.
How many writers do we have in the audience? Are there a lot of writers in the audience? Do we have, other than our Mavens, right? Chris is writing. I know Frankie certainly. And Sue, she's writing. Yeah.
every time we get together and do one of these events, and I've lost track, we're what's this, like number 15 or something, I don't remember, but every single time we get together and do one of these events, I can't wait to go sit at the computer and write some more. I get so excited just about creating, you know?
It's true.
I
And it
agree.
makes me feel like I need to be a lot more organized and write out maps of where things are. I'm always saying, the person's right or left.
But you have the advantage of a map exists. All you have to do is Google a map of Rome.
Well, it's true, but I still make things up where I need to. That's the magic of being
Right,
able to
that's
put
right,
things
that's right.
generally in an area.
And to avoid liability. You don't want to get in trouble for having something happen in a real place.
That's right. That's right. That's another reason why I enjoy writing a fictitious village. So nobody can have a gripe.
Nobody knows.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Enjoy the rest
Again,
of
please.
the day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.